liberties were not trampled upon. That was really important to a lot of states. The anti-federalists. Anti-federalists, and it almost sounds like a derogatory term, but these were well-meaning people, and these were people that were basically, they were concerned about the Constitution. They didn't want to see individual liberties eroded. All the people that were living in the states at that time were used to self-government, were used to government within their jurisdiction, local government. So the Constitution is now creating a central government, and they were concerned. And so their arguments of the anti-federalists are also extremely useful when trying to determine the meaning of the Constitution.
So it looks like the anti-federalists were right.
In what regard?
That the Constitution would allow the unchecked growth of government.
The Constitution doesn't allow it. Some federal judges have allowed it, and some presidents have done it, and some Congress people have done it. And I'm hoping that all these folks that are sitting in this room today are going to help turn that around, because we have to turn it around. The founders. All the people that were significantly involved in the creation of the Constitution. And they included all the above groups that I just mentioned, plus the Confederation Congress and the first Federal Congress. The founding generation, everybody that we're talking about right now. Standard sources for the original legal effects of the Constitution. And keep in mind, the Constitution is a legal document. The text of the Constitution itself, the convention notes, even though the convention, the Federal Convention, was a secret convention, James Madison and other delegates kept incredible notes. James Madison in particular kept extremely good notes. Federalist Papers, other documents, Articles of Confederation, early state constitutions. These all give you, they were all instrumental in our Constitution, our federal Constitution, and they, so in other words, reading those will help you understand our Constitution. Knowing how legal documents were created in the 18th century is an extremely important way of being able to understand the Constitution. Also, I hope you're all studying your Latin. Who are the men who crafted our Constitution? They believed in God. The natural law, which was something that John Locke in England had written about in the 1600s. And of course, when you read the Declaration of Independence, the beginning of the Declaration was very much inspired by John Locke. These people were lawyers, or they were versed in the law, so they understood how the law worked, how legal documents worked. They had a common history, both an English history as well as a U.S. history. The Constitution is a legal document. I think I've said that a couple times. It uses the vocabulary that was typical in legal documents, and it followed the customs of drafting a legal document. During the ratification debates, oftentimes the contentions were over legal terms that were used within the Constitution. So the people that created our Constitution, they were brilliant people, but they didn't do it all on their own. They were inspired by other documents, and they were smart people. They didn't necessarily have to be lawyers, but they were versed in the law. They might have come from an agricultural background, but they were business people as well. The influences of the Constitution. Here's a long list. And oh, you know what? I completely forgot to mention this. The 14 up here, that's indicating which page I'm talking about in the text. Sorry about that. But in all truth, what I'm talking about tonight just kind of follows the reading page by page, section by section. This is not complete, but this gives you an idea of the influences for the creation of our government and the creation of the Constitution. The Magna Carta is the oldest document, going back to 1215, a very important document. But all these, got a little late to think, all these different documents that were created in Great Britain were all very important. And then here in the United States, colonial charters, commissions from royal commissions, the Mayflower Compact, and then some of the various state constitutions and state documents that were created. Conventions. Conventions were a British device. They were basically a way for the people to kind of take control of government processes for a limited period. Convention is usually a group of individuals who come together for a very specific reason. They're going to work out some kind of legal issue, draft some law, something to that effect. So for example, the Constitutional Convention, they came together for a purpose, which was really to replace the Articles of Confederation, to create a new document that gave the central government more power. There's a long history of conventions. Colonial conventions, there were conventions within states, when states would create their own constitutions. When our governments decided, or excuse me, when our states decided, or colonies decided that we would actually get rid of some of the royal governments that had been established, it was decided in conventions. So conventions are a very powerful part of the history of our nation. Federal Convention, this would have been our Constitutional Convention, 1787. 55 delegates, as I mentioned a moment ago. George Washington was the president. However, much of the debate happened in the Committee of the Whole. Proceedings, as I mentioned earlier, were kept secret, but we do have a wonderful record, and that helps give us some insight on the actual drafting of the Constitution and what it meant. Ratification. Once the Constitution became public, it was sent to Congress. That's when opposition rose up. You know, people were concerned about it, especially that it would suppress liberties. And so a job of the Federalists was to really to print articles in the paper talking about different sections of the Constitution and why they were written the way that they were written. For example, I've mentioned in the past, I'm involved in Article 5 issues as far as getting like a balanced budget amendment passed at the state level. Several sections in the Federalist Papers written by James Madison as well as Alexander Hamilton talk about that section of amending the Constitution. Article 5 type authority goes all the way back into the 16th century England. The Federalist Papers, as well as the speakers, helped persuade states to ratify the Constitution. The other half wanted assurances, of course, as Joy mentioned, that liberties would be maintained, but also that there would be a Bill of Rights. And goodness, those first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights really protect our liberties. They're so instrumental to our liberties. Some of the parts of the Bill of Rights, James Madison actually wanted to include in the original Constitution, and there was lots of debates why that he wasn't allowed to, and so they ended up then resurfacing as the Bill of Rights. The Constitution is a restraining document. It's basically, the structure of the Constitution is basically to bind politicians so that they will adhere to law. And of course, as we've seen, politicians have a lot of wiggle capability, and they find ways of trying to evade law. It's been said that almost 2/3 of the Constitution was written to basically restrain the government, as opposed. So it's not a document that's giving rights and giving powers and liberties. It's mostly about restraining government. This quote here is wonderful. The people of America can never be safe if Congress have a right to exercise power of giving construction to the Constitution